Retro Hangover, supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Ashton Ruby, Randall Quiggle, Tony G, Stud Still Smash the Milkman, Keith Gasper, Miss Peachy, JC, Megan Caruso, Mass Keaton, Andrew LaGuarri, Ozzy Garcia, The Retro Vixen, Adam from The Good, the Bad, the Backlog, Lunchbox, aka The Disgruntled Gamer, Dischimera, Jenny E, Rick Firestone, Parallax Puddles, Soha, Dave Jackson, Matt, aka Stormageddon, Retro Overdrive, B. Ross and Van Fernal from Super Garbage Day, Raging Demon, Storm Beagle, The Emperor, Eric Guess, Nomad from the Retro Wildlands podcast, Ash Event, Alan Bingham, Ryan, Player One, Mike the Ref from Backbreaker Gaming, Darth Emick, Low5 Alex, Alt, Renner Dreaming, and Oh Me. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Ouvrez vos oreilles et craquez des bières. You are listening to Retro Hangover.
C'est la gueule des boy retro. We are here. Why are we speaking in French? I don't know. Well, I do know.
Speaking in French poorly.
Poorly. Very poorly, probably. I think anyone who is French would probably be very upset with us. But you know what? If you're a longtime listener to the show, you know how I feel about that. But not you beautiful French Canadians. I have different feelings, I suppose. But what are we talking about today, Shane?
Well, we happen to be talking about a little game called Jester that was brought to us. Actually, I'm actually honestly I'm kind of excited about this because we perhaps you may or may not know, but we're not exactly we're not Joe Rogan here or anything. We're not Critical Role, so we don't always get folks just rolling up to us being like, hey, please talk about this thing. Wouldn't you please? Oh, pretty please. That's not normal. But our friends over at MegaCat Studios actually reached out to us and asked if we would like to get in on some early demo action of a game that they were publishing or are publishing. Actually, at the time of this release, I believe it either is going to be out. And yeah, it's called Jester. And Chris, I know that you're going to want to give a little bit of additional context on kind of what this thing is, right?
Yeah, sure. Since this is a Gaiden of sorts, I guess this is how we're categorizing this, because Gaidens are usually for games that don't make it to the main show, usually less than 10 years old. We're not going to have a brief history, but there is kind of a brief history here with this game, because it's not technically a new game, even though it is a new game. So this game came out in Canada through something called Videoway. This also existed in parts of the United Kingdom. If you want a somewhat direct comparison, this is kind of like the Sega channel. And what it would do is that it would deliver games right over your Nintendo, or just, I guess not even Nintendo. I think it's just directly over cable, and provide games for you. And this is one of those games that existed back then. Unfortunately, over time, actually, I'm not going to get into that because I know Shane's going to get into that. Shane looked this up. But this game exists then. And the game that this was based off was called La Folie du Roi. What? La Folie du Roi. How do you say king? Is it Roi? Le Folie du Roi. I think that's it. Le Folie du Roi.
That sounds right.
Which means King's Jester. Close enough. Look, I'm not French, okay? I'm not trying to be. And fuck, I'm going to get so much trouble with the French, they actually listen to us. But this game went away. And so what MegaCat Studios is doing is they got with a developer called CollectorVision, and they're trying to get all these games that came from this Videoway cable service and rebuild them from the ground up, and essentially let a new generation of people play these games. And they are coming out with original hardware not original hardware, original software. Like, they're coming out on NES carts. They have collector's editions and, the full gamut of boxes. You can buy the cart loose at prices that will be over at MegaCat, I'm sure, or other locations that might be selling them. At the time of this recording, and according to the press kit that they provided us, if you want to get a cart only for the NES and Super Nintendo, by the way, that is $40 or $39.99. If you want to get a complete in box version, they are $50 a piece. And there is a limited edition complete in box NES edition. I'm not sure if that will still be up because it is limited. And that is $150, and that's what you can get here. But before we get into the details of this game, I do, like you said, full disclosure, this was provided to us, and we did not get the full game. We only got a demo. So that is what we got. Shane, how about you get into what was the Videoway through your research that you did on it?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty fascinating, and it dives pretty deep into this whole like lost media category, which grows by the day. Fortunately, I think there's a lot more preservation efforts going on these days than back then. So I would hope, that a lot of the digital stuff that we have now isn't going to be lost to time, but that's another discussion that we've had before, by the way. So go check that out if you haven't. Shameless plug. But the Videoway service was an analog interactive cable TV system that was in Quebec, Canada. And it was offered by the telecommunications provider Videotron between the years of 1990 and 2006. I'm actually surprised that it went that long, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah.
But they sort of were this like self-described interactive addressable television entertainment system, which is a mouthful. And at the time, it offered a lot of teletext services like the weather, current lottery results, horoscopes, road conditions, and of course, video games. In addition to some other things with like interactive TV programming and like on-demand stuff. So what's interesting about this is that it was really industry-leading technology when it came out, in the very early 90s. But the Videoway service just never really garnered the sort of mass adoption that they were looking for. And a huge part of that, unsurprisingly, was the internet. As soon as, access to the internet became a more commonplace thing in folks' homes, this whole teletext thing they were trying to do kind of quickly became obsolete. And so as a result of that, they had this library of games that you could only play through their system with a special TV remote. There were roughly 50 titles, most of which were actually original titles developed specifically for this service. There were a few ports like Burger Time, for example, or Qbert. Those were both ported to the Videoway system, but most of them were completely original, and just about all of them are completely lost. There's slim to no chance of actually recovering any of the original ROMs at all. And so that's kind of where we land here with Jester, because as Chris mentioned, this was an exclusive to the Videoway system, and the developers that jumped on this and were trying to sort of resurrect this thing and make it available to people for really the first time since, the Videoway system shut down in Canada. All they really had to go on was like a screen capture that happened to be floating around, which, by the way, if you want to check that out, you can find it on the internet. But the Lost Media Wiki, shout out to that, is where a lot of this information is coming from. But there was a screen capture, and they took the time to go and also speak with some of the original devs, so I'm told. But it's wild to me that like really all they had to go on was this one image. And it's crazy that such a big library, a library of games actually that's bigger than some like better known consoles, now that I think about it, it's just gone, So you have all of these games that were developed and were available for this amount of time and are just nowhere to be found. So that part I think is really cool. Like the fact that they wanted to go and sort of resurrect this game is a really neat idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I want to stress, even though this game is coming out for the Super Nintendo and Nintendo via Mega Cat Studios and CollectorVision, is that this game was not originally a Nintendo or Super Nintendo game. They had to completely build this game to be functional on those systems. So I think one thing that we're probably going to get into with this, with talking about this game and kind of reviewing the demo and giving our impressions of what we're seeing here is, this was a game that was provided over a cable service. So maybe it wasn't necessarily the most complicated type of game. And I think this is a good way to just jump into what kind of game this is, which is kind of like a maze chaser Pac-Man type game that's slightly more complicated. Like there's elements of a bunch of different games in here. Most notably, it is Pac-Man, of course, because you got to get you can get an item that allows you to eat your enemies, so to speak. And that item is a sword, and it gives you a limited amount of time where you can eat your enemies. But it's also more complicated. Like there's elements of Berserk because you have to like move to different screens, get keys that will allow you to get items that are in the center of a map, which isn't Berserk, which is probably some other things. I'm not too well versed in the Atari era type games and that era in general, but it's very much within that same vein. But yes, that key will unlock a door in a room, not necessarily the room you're at, and then you might have to go to a different room to get that item. And you have 3 different meters: one for your attack, which is like your power pellet in Pac-Man terms; one for your torch, which will allow you to see the room, and once you run out of that, the room becomes black and like completely dark, and you have to move around without seeing where the maze is and everything like that. And the other one is your food, which can only be replenished once you get one of those items in the middle after you unlock it. At least that's my understanding. Am I missing anything in terms of how this game functions conceptually?
No, I think you got most of it. I think maybe the easiest way to kind of visualize this, if you're not looking at the game itself or that screenshot that's floating around, it is probably best described, I think, as like a OG Zelda / Pac-Man clone. So if you think of it that way, like if you remember the original Legend of Zelda, the dungeons are, one screen at a time. And this looks very similar to that, but it is more Pac-Man-esque in how the screens are laid out and how your enemies move. They basically they move exactly like the ghosts do in Pac-Man for the most part. So I think that's the closest comparison that I would probably make. The interesting thing that I like about this are actually those meters. So it adds this extra level of complexity. Because like when I fired this up, I thought it was Pac-Man. I'm gonna be honest. I thought it was a straight Pac-Man rip, and I was just like, oh, okay. So it's Pac-Man with different sprites. That's neat, I guess. But then I quickly realized that there's actually more going on here. So, I hesitate to say this because labels get thrown around a lot, but in a way, this feels a little bit like a survival game almost, if you think about it.
I honestly thought you were going to say Metroidvania, and then I was going to reach over the mic and strangle you.
I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that crossed my mind just to piss you off, but no. No, it's a little bit like a survival game, because if you think of a lot of like the survival crafting games that are just everywhere now, right? You have these constantly ticking down values of like hunger and thirst and whatever, exposure to elements and things like that. And this is like a very simplified take on that, I think, because in addition to, the power up, the sword that allows you to actually defeat the enemies, the guards that are kind of floating around, you have the food and the torch. So you've got those 2 different things that you need to manage. And it does kind of introduce this interesting strategy as you move from screen to screen, getting through this dungeon to get all the keys to finally exit to the next level, is like, okay, I need to manage, like, do I still have enough food? Like, do I need to get that? Or when should I pick up this other torch? Because most rooms will have another torch pickup to replenish your light source, right? So it's like this deterministic thing of like, okay, how long can I go? Like, can I make it over and pick up that item? Should I grab the torch now, knowing that like I maybe I'm going to waste a little bit of it? So it does introduce this interesting element of like trying to maintain those things while, you know, ultimately trying to defeat all of the enemies and grab all of the items. So I did like that. It does introduce like a pretty satisfying additional layer of complexity, I thought.
Well, if you're going down the survival route, do you think instead of Zelda, it might borrow a little bit more from maybe Adventure, Haunted House, or the Tower of Duraga?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't see the Zelda, mostly because you can't attack. You pick something up, and like this is a very, very, very basic game. And what I do like too, which your point here is when you're picking these items up and you have to strategize how you pick these items because they're on a timer. More specifically, I mean, the keys aren't, right? But the weapon is, and the torch is, and you're not on a timer necessarily in and of itself. Like, depending on when you pick things up, you have as much time as you need in order to get things done. Now, the demo only covers the first level, and the level that we were given, and I don't know if they expand. I don't know how bigger it gets or how it varies, but it's a 3x3 grid. And that's how you progress, is you go into every single square and you have to pick up all the items in the center before you can get to the next level, which for the first level, it appears the multiple times I played this, it's in the bottom left-hand corner, which is where you exit. So I don't know if this varies from level to level, or if there is a torch in every level, or if there is a key in every square, or if there's an attack item in every square. And if you have to manage, that space and watch your timing and try to get multiple enemies and try to time it better in each area, I would hazard to guess that might be how the game would progress as it gets later, because that's what these kind of arcade type kind of games tend to do. But just from the demo version only being able to play one level, I'm not able to speak to that too well.
Sure. Yeah. And so, well, one of the other things that I have, I'm going to be honest, I have some conflicting feelings about it. I'm not sure where I land on this quite yet, is the torch when it runs out. So I did in my at least one of my, quick playthroughs through this demo, got to a point where I definitely let the torch go because I was overextending myself a little bit to try to get all of the bonus items, which I did, for the record. And I suppose I should explain that really quick. But so every screen of this like 3x3 grid that is the dungeon has enemies in it, and you don't actually have to defeat the enemies like at all. It's actually purely optional. And obviously you get more points for doing it because this is an old school style game. So of course you have a point total. But the other perhaps motivator for that, again, it's largely point based, is getting a bonus item. So if you defeat all of the enemies on one screen, then a bonus item will pop up and you can grab that. And if you collect all of those, you get like the extra bonus points at the end of the level, et cetera, et cetera. So I was overextending myself a little bit trying to do that. And then I let the torch go out. And I thought that was like an instant game over, because if the torch goes out, then you're just like, oh, well, you're screwed. Might also be because I've been playing Shadow Dark lately, and that tabletop RPG is based entirely around torch mechanics, where if your torch goes out, you're probably fucked. But I digress. So then I found that that's not the case, that as Chris mentioned earlier, if your torch goes out, you still get to play. It's just pitch black. And the only thing you can see is your own sprite. So on one hand, I kind of liked that, because I was like, oh, it's not an instant game over, and now I just need to find my way in the dark. Like that's kind of cool. But then on the other hand, I was like, wow, finding your way in the dark fucking sucks.
Yeah, because you kind of have to guess. And one of the things about these controls, it's not like Pac-Man where you're constantly moving. It's right. You got to manually move your character to like a junction point. And unless your Jester character is exactly where that junction point is, that he's not moving, which feels kind of weird. And I understand why that mechanic's there, because if it wasn't there, then you could just kind of get through the area. Like, you don't necessarily need the torch, because they just kind of manually shift into the hole as is.
Right.
would that make it a little bit easier and de-incentivize you from picking up that torch. When it comes down to it in terms of control, that's where I'm kind of sitting on the fence with that, because I am used to these maze chasers being a little bit more flexible in terms of getting through those certain like holes in the wall. Like you want to make sure that ease of access is a little bit easier. And when the light's on, it makes that control a little bit stiffer. So when I'm trying to get up into the next area, sometimes I find myself, like if I'm moving left and I want to go up into like a segment, like a hole there, I normally will press up too early and I'll just stop. And that's a little frustrating.
Yep.
And that gets in the way of my control a little bit. And that's what makes navigating Jester a little bit more difficult than I would prefer. Sounds like you have the same issues.
Yes, I 100% agree. Honestly, I think that's really the only criticism that I could take away from playing the demo. It is the controls did not feel great. And part of that, I think, is, like you said, because we're more used to more fluid movement, a la Pac-Man, for example. But my expectation for a game like this, right, is especially when, you know, your timing of your movement is so crucial, both in trying to chase down the enemies while your sword power up is still active, and also just being able to move on to the next place to, you know, re-up your torch so you're not fumbling around in the dark. It is supremely frustrating to have controls that don't respond the way that you would want them to. And I had the same exact issue where I would be pressing, like, let's say it's not even up or down, like right or left to move in a direction. And if I was not pressing like exactly correctly onto the left part of my D-pad, the Jester would just stop dead in his tracks. And it was almost as if he was like getting caught on the level geometry. Like, I don't think that's the case at all, but it's what it feels like. It's like he was getting like snagged on something on the wall, and it would be to the point where I would like let go and press left again. And it's like he would like jerk forward, but like wouldn't move. And I guess it was because I was sort of also pressing down like accidentally. And so the inputs were like getting confused and thinking I was trying to move down. And so the Jester would just stop dead. And that happened way more often than I'd like. So yeah, if there's any like major criticism that I have about it, it would be that I kind of wish that the directional controls were a little bit more flexible and a little bit more forgiving. Like I would want to be able to, like in your example, if you're like, let's say moving to the right and then you want to quickly go up to, you know, enter into the next screen or something, I would expect that I should be able to be holding down right and then roll my thumb to go up, and the character should just move smoothly in that way. And I found that wasn't really the case here.
And once again, like I do understand from a design concept, because if you could do that, it makes it, when the torch goes out, a little bit more inconsequential. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're trying to rebuild this game from how it was originally. So you don't want to deviate too much from what the original developers remembered. And if it's like putting more barriers or making things more complicated or kind of screwing with the player by adding dead ends, and if that's not faithful to the original, and this could be happening later in the game as well, which would make it, you know, doubly frustrating if your torch ran out, which is actually something I would understand. It's not something I would necessarily condemn, because there has to be a consequence to you letting your torch go out. But when there's a fluid kind of thing of movement, I agree with you. I think that is something that is kind of a complaint. There's no reason to really limit the fluidity of that movement, unless that was just something they weren't thinking of. And to stress, as I already have, I do see this as a gameplay option to get around the torches and make it so like, oh, see, like now you can't move up there, even though there might be a hole up there, because you're not precisely on the tile. And if you could see it, then you could know where the tile was and you could adjust yourself. But you don't know that right now. So ha ha ha.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, I see what you're getting at in that, like, but what I'm not saying that you should be able to like hold the D-pad diagonally and just like slide along a wall. That's not what I'm getting at. Because if that was the case,
Right.
100, that would totally trivialize the whole torch mechanic, right? So that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that like just basic transition from one direction to the other just feels real janky. And I wish that was maybe cleaned up a little bit. But like I said, other than that, I think that's really the only major complaint, honestly.
I think, is there any more to the gameplay? I think we've covered it pretty well. The demo lasts, a total about 5 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. That's what we got from the demo.
Yeah, well, I will say I'll add a little extra there. So there's one thing that I do like. I mean, it's incredibly rudimentary, but it doesn't have to be anything more. But I actually do appreciate the inclusion of the little like grid map in the top right of the screen.
No, I do like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about that is when you collect enough keys to unlock another like central area on one of the screens, if you're not on that, well, even if you are on it, but that tile on that little mini map will start flashing green or will turn green so that you can see like, oh, this is where I need to go to get my next like objective item. So also a nice touch. And I think that's a nice middle ground, right? Like you don't need a full blown map with like directions or whatever, but this gives you just enough information to know what you need to do next, which was something we brought up about the original Zelda and the fact that I highly disliked the either complete lack of or shitty dungeon maps. So this was nice.
It was nice. I mean, even though it's just a 3x3 grid, I mean, it's not overly complicated.
It's not, but I do appreciate having it there, though.
No, I agree. But let's get into the graphics here and how the game looks. We could just cover the whole entire audio visual, I think, here, because there's not really much in the way of audio, if we're being honest. I'll start this off really quick and just say I think it looks fine. I think it looks extremely basic. It looks like an early Famicom game, an early NES game. But again, like you're recreating something. It's not necessarily... You're not trying to make this visual spectacle. You're trying to recreate someone's memories. So, I mean, I can't complain, right?
Well, yeah. And I mean, even just looking at the screen grab of like the original game on the Videoway, they did a really good job of faithfully recreating that. So to me, I think that's kind of the angle that I would take on this one, which is a little different from what we normally do on the show. And to me, I'm looking at it like less of like, are the graphics like good? And it's more like how well did they sort of recreate the original based on the honestly very sparse information that they had. And from what I've seen from the demo gameplay and comparing it to the screen grabs that's online, I would say it's more or less 1-to-1. So I think they kind of did a bang up job there. I wouldn't expect too much else in the way of graphics, like you said, given the era in which this game originally came out and the fact that it was on a like TV, like cable box service.
Yeah, it wasn't even directly connected to, from what you said, any real hardware. And there's just data coming over and streaming, which was very rudimentary back then in terms of the services it could provide. Especially graphical-based services. So could graphics be better during the time that this was released? Yeah, of course. Like there was a ton of games that looked way better than what this game is going to look like, especially even from the screenshot that you could find online, because I found it myself. Yeah, games when this game came out were looking a lot better. But in terms of what you're getting through the system, you're talking essentially, it sounds like you're streaming games in the early 90s. So if you're talking about streaming games through the early 90s into your TV through your cable box with no hardware system to help back it up, yeah, I could understand why it's as simple as it is. And them trying to recreate that, yeah, that makes sense why it's going to look more like a Famicom, or I'm sorry, a Nintendo game. Talking like I'm living in Japan or something. But it's going to look more like a early Nintendo game than it would maybe at the time a late Nintendo game, early Super Nintendo, late Genesis game. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, for sure. And like it may very well be because as far as I know, the only surviving screen capture of this is the one that we're both looking at. That's about 640 by 480 pixels. And blurry as fuck. But so that could be part of it. But I will say that comparing this to Jester, what the final product that they've got here, I dare say that they actually made some visual improvements over the original, because I think the sprites for the skulls, which are the guards that kind of bop around each one of the screens, and the Jester himself, I think they appear to be more detailed in this release than in the original. So I do think that they took some artistic liberty with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the sound, music design, it sounds like an NES game. The only music I had, it's not like it's an NES game. I wouldn't say it's bad. There's music in the beginning at the intro, which is fine. And there's music that you get when you beat the demo, which is fine. Nothing here really stands out. Nothing really wows me. It's just, hey, here's a Nintendo game, and a Nintendo-ass Nintendo game, which, again, can't fault it necessarily, but it is what it is. I'm calling a spade a spade. You're not getting anything to really surprise or overwhelm you in this instance.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think I have too much more to add to that. I think it's exactly what you would expect from a game like this from that time period. So, yeah, I think from what I heard from playing the demo, I liked all of the sound effects and the little bit of music that we did get.
So, I mean, what's our final verdict on this? I think you should go first here, Shane. What's your final thoughts here on Jester?
Well, we are contractually obligated by MegaCat Studios to tell you that, yes, you should play. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I mean, this might be one of those cases where they're just like, well, we're never talking to those fucking guys again. But no, I think so. Yeah. So here's the thing is, like, I wouldn't normally. Okay. If I saw this just wherever, if it was a ROM to download or whatever, this wouldn't necessarily be something that I'd be like super jazzed to play. I'd be like, oh hell yeah, like get me in on that action. But having it provided to us and me having the opportunity to sit down and play through it purposefully, I actually enjoyed it way more than I expected to. It's almost deceptively simple at the beginning because, like I said, I thought it was just going to be a straight Pac-Man clone, but it very quickly turned out not to be that. And so I ended up enjoying it more than I expected. And as far as like whether or not, I mean, here's the thing. This is the only way that you can play this game, right? Because I was poking through some more of the details of this whole Videoway thing. And the wild thing about it is when that service was discontinued in 2006, anyone who was still subscribing, basically they had their Videoway terminals, the actual cable box that was rented to them, taken from their homes by Videoway. So they just they took them back. And I don't think this has been 100% confirmed, but it was rumored that Videotron, which is the company that was running the Videoway service, basically destroyed all of those remaining cable boxes. And so finding any of those surviving ones nowadays is actually incredibly uncommon. It's very rare. And there have been a few unsuccessful attempts to emulate the proprietary system that was in those cable boxes. But because it relied so heavily on teletext data that's obviously not being transmitted anymore, the chances of truly recreating that experience are pretty much slim to none. Although apparently, and I don't think they got their hands on this, but the source code for those Videoway exclusive games is rumored to be held in a Videotron vault, but nobody's been able to track that down. So whether or not that's just legend or not, up to you to decide. But here's my thing. I think that this is special in that this was something that otherwise we would have never been able to experience. And I really do applaud MegaCat and CollectorVision Games for, really kind of making this thing happen. I will say and I know it's not their deal, right? I know it's not their jam because they want to be authentic. And so they're releasing these in carts, but MegaCat, can we get a digital version? Can we do that? Because I would definitely like a digital version that I could play. Just a thought, because even though I'm a host of a retro video game podcast. I don't actually have an NES like in my house. I have a Super Nintendo, so I guess I could make that work. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Super Nintendo cart chain.
yeah, I mean, either way, a digital version would be nice, is all I'm saying. Although that limited edition Jester cartridge is pretty fucking ballin', though. I gotta say that.
It does look cool. It does look cool. I would say that the cartridge, that the custom cart that they have for the game looks actually pretty cool. It's textured. It has convex areas and everything like that by the appearance of it. It's actually really nice looking.
Yeah, and I went off on a tangent here, but suffice to say, I think so. Yes, I think it's worth it. I'm actually interested to see what more there is, because like we said, we were provided the demo for the purposes of this episode, which is just the first level. So I would actually be really curious to see how the game sort of evolves the further you go into it.
Oh yeah, sure. No, 100%. I agree with you on that one. Just how complicated it could get. Or what changes or what deviates, stuff like that. How many levels there are.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of reverse say what you said in terms of my take on this. I think that if you release this game for $5 or less on digital, this is a game that you should be able to play. Mm-hmm. I know that's not probably what a lot of people like to hear, especially in the retro gaming space. If a game is worth it, a game is worth it. But I think if we're being realistic, I don't think that's like too many people that think that. If we're being realistic, that's what you should expect. If I were to release just the original bare bones version of Galaga, which is more complicated than what we're playing here with Jester, and I charged any more than $5 for it on a modern platform, you would call me insane. And I think that would be justified. And I don't think Jester provides more than what you are getting in Galaga. Now, does that mean I'm completely dismissing the historical aspect or what Megacat and CollectorVisions were trying to do here? No, I'm not trying to dismiss that at all. There are some very important things that are going on here in terms of video game preservation, in terms of what they're trying to do here, and that is stellar. My hat goes off to them. But at the same time, it's like charging $40 for a game like this is there. It's just on novelty, and I think the people are going to get the most out of this were the people who played, Videoway back in the day. And I think if it was a cartridge with multiple Videoway games that were recreated for the NES, and I know that might be asking way too much. I'm not sure the limits of what I'm asking here. I think if you were able to make somewhat of a collection of Videoway games on an NES cart, I think that would be more enticing. But when you start getting down to the nitty gritty, this is $40 for the cart only $10 more for a complete in box. And I understand these are custom boxes, perhaps manuals that will come along with it. So only a $10 upcharge for all that extra stuff is not too bad. And then you're charging $150 for a limited edition. You're getting into the FOMO kind of collector's market, which is something that I've kind of been a part of. And I kind of hate that part about me. Like, that's not something I'm happy about. So when I look at that, there's a little bit of exploitation that I'm not quite happy about, taking advantage of a collector's market, which I'm not quite sure that there is a market for this to be a collector's item. Expand it. Definitely release a digital version of the game. Make it sub $5. Being able to go on sale at $2.50 or whatever. I know that you gotta repay the people who developed this game, which there are only 4 people who did that, and they need to be compensated for their work. And I 100% agree that they should be. But you also have to realize on the product that you're marketing to people. And this game is pretty bare bones, especially from the demo that I got. And is there strategy? Is it fun? Yeah, but it's like Atari games. They're good, but how much are you willing to shell out for an Atari game? Even hey, I mean, I know there's a market for it. I definitely know there's a market for it, because Atari was trying to, and well, I'm not going to say trying to, they did sell Atari carts for like $100 at one point through limited run games. And I was tempted to get one because the whole entire presentation, the packaging was very attractive. But at the end of the day, I had to remind myself, are you going to spend $100 for Yar's Revenge? No, you're not going to do that. If this appeals to you, get it. I'm not at that point where I am dedicated to say that this game is worth $40, even with the effort put into the cart.
Yeah, I would say I think that's honestly a fair assessment. Like I understand, the production costs that go into making an actual physical cartridge for, well, actually not only an NES but also a Super Nintendo cart.
Absolutely.
So obviously that's factored into those costs, which is why, again, I was saying that I think a digital release would also be a great way to get this out to even more people. I'm not sure if they're planning that. I don't think that's generally the MO here, but I could be wrong. But I would even go so far as to say, like, me personally, and this is just my subjective take, but for something like this, I would even say that it might be worth like that $9.99 price point. Now, I know we're basing the $5 on like a lot of the virtual console stuff, and that makes sense.
Right.
But I think the sort of level of complexity that you're getting from this is on par with pretty much any other virtual console game, right?
Oh, less.
But okay, sure, less. I'm just thinking like NES, whatever. But yeah. But it's in that neighborhood. And then you've got sort of the novelty factor and the fact that like you can't really play this anywhere else, even if you tried. So I feel like the $9.99 price point would probably be justifiable for a digital version. And then, like you said, if it's on Steam and goes on sale for $5 or whatever, 75% off, like, cool, great. That's a steal at that point. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. I'm not in the physical collector community, so I wouldn't necessarily justify paying the asking price for those. But like, kind of like to your earlier point, if that's your thing, then by all means, do it up. Like you're not going to get this anywhere else. So, if that's worth your money, then absolutely go for it.
Well, that's also where I'm torn. I like how this is going to turn into kind of a collector's conversation instead of, see, listeners, you're going to get more than just the game conversation. Thank you for showing up. But like when it comes to the entire collector's market, it's kind of like that age-old story about how the 90s collector's market for comic books killed comic books for a while, when every single comic that was coming out was collector's edition, and every single release was special. And at the end of the day, what that meant is that no releases were special because everything was collector's edition. And we've kind of been that way for like mainstream gaming for a while now. And that's why I think like so little mainstream gaming for the past 5-10 years is actually going to be a valued item. It's those items that people weren't expecting to be collector's items, which has kind of been the case forever. So when you get to this point where it's, hey, get this is a collector's item, this is a limited edition cart, but you have how many different limited edition carts come out in a month? Like, you can only be stretched so thin, and you're almost kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And I agree with you. I would love to see this on a digital platform, because that's kind of how this game existed to begin with. And I understand digital platforms are somewhat finicky, right? Because at whatever point, the rights can be taken away, and it might not be provided on the carrier anymore. You might have access to it even if you bought it. And that's always a problem. And I think we all recognize that as a problem.
Well, I mean, hell, man, you could package it up as a digital executable and just sell it directly through like the MegaCat website or something.
Yeah,
just have people download it directly.
Yeah, and I wouldn't see an issue with that. And I understand the appeal of putting out an NES or SNES cartridge, because if you can groove with that aesthetic, and that's is exactly what that aesthetic was from that image that they're kind of basing everything off of, and from what they got from the developers by talking to them, that's what you're getting. You're getting kind of like that NES aesthetic put over a cable thing. But like, if the legacy of this game is being on a non-physical format, there's no reason why you cannot put it on a non-physical format and sell it directly to consumers. And you don't need to do that for a high price. They're almost, I don't know. You're right. They're probably going to hate me by the end of this episode, but you're almost shooting yourself in the foot by putting such high production values into a cart that like is an extremely niche market. Like this is a niche within a niche within a niche. This is like there's a very small group of people who probably are in love with the Videoway cable system, and how many of those people are willing to bust out an old NES in order to play this? I would think that's very few people, unless they're just dedicated to collecting everything. And Mega Cat Studios, they are known for putting their things on digital platforms like Coffee Crisis, for example. You can get that on the Nintendo Switch at the very least, and so many other releases you can get digitally that come with physical releases on their Nintendo platforms. So that's available through Mega Cat, or historically has been. I don't know if that's going to ring true with Jester here, but I think that'd only be fitting. Like, I almost don't understand why they're I don't know what the difference between the NES and SNES versions would be, but you could almost make this like an expanded version digitally, just in the spirit of the fact that this is a digital game. And maybe once the dust is settled and you can release these games digitally that were Videoway, then you can make that collection cart that you can release for an NES or Super Nintendo or the Evercade. I know that Mega Cat Studios loves doing stuff for the Evercade because there's no system that all these games are beholden to. You're kind of free to do whatever you want. So
Yeah.
I'm not a business expert. I'm not a business anything, really. I can't tell you how to make money off your video games. I can only tell you what I'm willing to buy and what I don't want to buy. And I wouldn't buy this physical cart. I might buy this digitally, but I also want a couple other games because of the basic nature of it. And that might not be fair. It's just the way that the video game market has conditioned me to react to very simple games that are from the era of like Atari and such, even though this is from the 90s. It's well after that. But at the same time, that's the kind of style of game that you're getting.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that kind of makes that doubly difficult nowadays, right, is like kind of the bar that we've set for games and like what our expectation is. Because the one of the first things that comes to mind, and part of the reason that going back to some of these older, more simplistic games is very difficult and doesn't really hold my attention, is because I'm just like, dude, I can play a full-fledged like 4K resolution 3D game on my phone. Like, why am I going back and playing this? Like, we could play a game of this caliber on like a Nokia like 20 years ago, or something like that. So that's kind of one of the things that typically, and it's not specific to this, it's just in general, going back to those games, it's not even almost, it is to me just a novelty where it's just like, oh, that was fun for like 10, 15 minutes, and now I'm never going to think about it again. So I think that does make it a little bit of a hard sell for sure. And to your point, it's kind of like a niche within a niche, because you've got a Canadian video cable system that at the time, apparently at its peak, had like 300,000 subscribers or something like that. So there are people that are probably nostalgic for it, but you've got that. And then, like you said, it's an additional layer of, okay, well, I'm nostalgic for this. And boy, do I remember playing that King's Jester game on my Videoway box, but I don't have an NES kicking around or a Super Nintendo kicking around the house to throw a cartridge into. So guess I'm not going to play it. So that's why I was saying I really do think that it would behoove them to consider some manner of digital release, whether that's going the Steam route or even making it, like I said, just available directly through Mega Cat. I think just having that as an option is just going to broaden this out to like so many more people.
Also, did you notice the Acclaim branding?
I did.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Part of the press kit that we got also was the box art from CollectorVision for Jester, and I really like it. I think it's cool.
Oh, the art is great. Like the packaging is fantastic. So if you do buy this, you are going to get a fantastically presented product. The cartridge looks fantastic. The art looks fantastic. I'm sure the box that's going to come with it is going to be beautiful. I'm just more talking about the content within the cartridge. And that's where I start to have my qualms. But I don't know. I only played the demo version, so who knows?
Yeah, it also, and I think this was part of that cover art that I was looking at, but it made me immediately think of like, what would it look like to remake Jester, but as like a wizardry style, like 3D, like first person dungeon crawler.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
I'm just saying it could be cool or horrifying, because then you have this giant floating skull coming down the hallway at you. So yeah. I don't know, man. Could work.
What's that? Like first person shooter, one of the earliest ones with the faces.
The what the heck is it? The Calibeth? Are you talking about that?
No, it's a first person shooter. A Calibeth is an RPG. Yeah, it's with the faces.
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. Are we sure this just wasn't a fever dream that you had once?
No, it's also like one of the first games to ever have recharge. It's Faceball 2000.
Oh, okay. Never heard of that.
Oh. Anyway, I think this is a good time to close up this episode. So
I think so, yes.
Yes. Shane, how about you give this spiel?
All right, yeah. Well, if this, for some reason, happens to be the first episode that you're joining us for, maybe you saw the Mega Cat and you were like, heck yeah, those my boys. Or you know, I'm not going to leave out CollectorVision. Maybe you're a big CollectorVision fan. Either way, welcome. We're glad that you're here. Hope you had a good time. And if you'd like to check out the rest of the stuff that we have, because in terms of stuff, boy, do we have a lot of it. After doing this whole casting of pods thing for as long as we have, we've sort of inadvertently built up quite a library. So you can find all of our back episodes as well as patron exclusive stuff if you want to go that route, all in one place. We make it pretty convenient for you, actually, and that is at our Linktree. So head on over to Linktree/Retro Hangover. That is linktr.ee/Retro Hangover. And there you will find links to the main show feed, as well as our Patreon, if you'd like to support the show that way and get access to a whole other bevy of content for you to pass the time with or listen to while you're working or working out, or as one of our patrons posted in our Discord, which you can also find at that link tree, by the way, today, at the time of this recording, you could also be listening to us on your smartwatch while you poop. So, hey, you live your life, do what you got to do. We don't judge. But anyway, I lost track of what I was saying there. I was sidetracked by the smartwatch pooping. But anyway, so all of that stuff, you can find it all there, as well as our YouTube channel where we've got video versions of all these episodes, as well as VODs from our Twitch streams, which Chris will tell you is on a certain day of the week, most of the time, if we feel like it. So Chris, where can the people find that?
You can find all of that stuff over at twitch.tv/retro hangover. And we might be streaming most of the time when we do stream. It's on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern time. That is in the United States. That is 9 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday nights for our appropriately named Sunday streams. So we hope to see you over there at twitch.tv/retro hangover. Go subscribe. Make us feel better about ourselves, because it won't cost you anything, because we're too lazy to be an affiliate or a partner. So no ads either. Yeah. Isn't that awesome? No ads. We're not going to torture you with that shit.
You benefit from our apathy. You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, one last thing before we wrap this whole deal up. I do once again just want to give a big thanks to Mega Cat Studios for reaching out to us for this. Absolutely. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully we have not set fire with a torch to any bridges with our honest review. We do love you guys. And by the way, if you haven't checked it out, we do have an episode with Mega Cat a little while back, and more of an interview style one. You should check that out. I thought it was pretty good. But yeah, big thanks to them for sending this our way. And I suppose, with all of that being said, until next time,
play with your Francois joysticks.
Shane here with a quick message. You know, the one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this. It has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee. And Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in head first with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.